Hello and welcome to the Rejuvenate Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Hawks, and I'm here with my co-host, Elwyn Robinson, the creator and founder of Genetic Insights and the author of the Rejuvenate Blueprint. And lovely listeners, thanks again so much for joining us in our series. For those of you that are just joining us for the first time, this episode today is a continuation of a practitioner series that we are doing, going through the 7 steps of the Rejuvenate Blueprint, which is looking at the root causes for chronic diseases. And today's episode, this is part 3 of the Rejuvenate Blueprint deficiencies. If you haven't checked out genetics or the first few episodes of deficiencies, please make sure you do. The links will be in the description below. And today's episode, part 3, we are looking at how to guide you on helping your clients meet as many of their nutritional needs through their diet rather than supplementation. And some of you who've been with us for some time, we've done a previous episode where we've looked into Chronometer, which is really helping you dive deep into the macros and the micronutrients of your meals. And today, Elwyn is going to walk us through how we can take a look at our meals that we are specifically eating and seeing where we can optimize. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Elwyn, as we kick off this episode, part 3 of deficiencies of the practitioner series.
Yeah, and so we're not going to be talking much about what the benefits are of nutrients and if you're likely to be deficient and stuff like that. We've already covered that in, as you said, the previous parts, Chrissy. So we're going to address that complaint that I get often, which is, all these supplements, it's no good, like they're too expensive, they've got stuff in that's bad for you, you should be able to get it from your diet. And these are, to some degree, reasonable objections, right? And as a practitioner, you may well be getting those from some clients. I say to some degree because, it is a little bit case by case. Like, it's quite hard to get enough of certain nutrients from diet. I'd say vitamin K2 is probably one example. That's something that really should be being made by your gut bacteria to really have optimal amounts, but for many people it isn't. And there are, other examples, again, we've talked about in previous episodes, but there are a few things where supplementation is beneficial. But I've been going over this in the last 6 months or so, and I've been surprised to find that even some nutrients that are considered to be, you have to supplement them, there's no way you can get enough from diet. And I'll name an example, magnesium. If you actually eat like a very highly nutrient dense diet, then it is possible to get at least the recommended daily allowance or recommended daily intake from diet, like the government recommended daily allowance. But also, it's true that the vast majority of people are not doing so, in my experience. And so for those people who have clients who want to get all their or as many as possible nutrients from food, I'd say that what we're going to talk about in this episode is extremely important. And even if that's not a priority for the client, I think it's still good to help them to get as much nutrients as possible from food, because of course, some of the objections about this are accurate. It is better to get your nutrients in whole food sources in many cases, not every case. Sometimes, depending on what the food comes with so many anti-nutrients that it's hard for the body to actually absorb. Sometimes the food comes with so many toxins that it's actually better to get it from a supplemental source than it is to get it from a whole food source. But it is true to say that when you take a large amount of an isolated nutrient, especially on its own, your body doesn't really know what to do with it. It's kind of alien. It's not in a form and not in a, let's say, ratio or concentration compared to other elements that the body's expecting. And so the body often doesn't utilize it as well as if it's coming from a whole food source. So basically, yeah, it is it is very desirable. I try and get like my 100% of every nutrient from my meals, like 100% of the recommended daily intake. But then I would still supplement, but if I'm supplementing, it's for more medicinal purposes, right? So if I've had some test and it shows that I am deficient in some nutrient, which is often down to, I'm still suffering of lead toxicity, for instance, me personally. Someone else maybe with hypothyroid, they've got a different reason why they'd be low in some nutrients. Someone with, digestive issues, they may have a different reason why they're still low in some nutrients. There's there's all kinds of health reasons why a person might still need extra nutrients despite meeting their what should be enough from their food. But I think we should at least try and get what we can from food. And actually, I think it's so awesome to go through and actually see and show your client. And I realize not everyone's got time for this, medical doctors specifically, but I know often, you guys don't have a huge amount of time to go through stuff with clients, let alone everything they're eating and stuff like that. But I would strongly recommend that you refer people in that case, to a nutritionist, to some kind of practitioner who can guide people on how to meet their nutritional needs from whole foods, maybe a health coach or something like that, someone who has the time basically to actually go through everything with you, to go through everything with the client and show them. And my experience is that when people see it for themselves, so when we enter every single one of the foods that they're eating in a day, and then we look at the totals of what they're getting in a day, it's so much more impactful than opinions. And rightfully so, because we've had so many opinions these days about what is and isn't good. And, generally, let's say you're told that you need to eat, I don't know, more iron or more B12 or whatever, right? So most people, what will they'll do, they'll Google, what foods are high in iron, what foods are high in B12, and it will just give a list and it won't give quantities in that list. And people are like, okay, so what's high in iron? Molasses, probably not going to eat that. Spinach, oh, I suppose I could have that. Usually red meat will barely even be on the list, even though, of course, it's one of the most obvious things, or shellfish, often very high as well. So what I'm saying is these lists are often not very helpful, not very accurate, do not actually give actual quantities, and do not give quantities based on the level of serving that a person is actually realistically going to eat. And so a lot of the time, someone may think, okay, well, I need more whatever, vitamin C, I need more B12, and then they'll start eating based on what they've just Googled, foods that are high in it, but they're still nowhere near meeting it, because these lists are extremely vague and often inaccurate. So it's very important to actually go through and see how much you actually eating of every food, and then how much of a nutrient is that actually giving you. My experience is, I don't talk to people. People don't come to me who are eating junk, who are eating McDonald's, who are eating, whatever food on the go, eating regularly at service stations or fast food or anything like that. I'm talking to people who are preparing their food often, from scratch, or putting a lot of effort into it several times a day. They're really thinking about it. They're often trying to be healthy, though admittedly there is often also some snacking and some, treats and stuff like that going on. And yet still they fall very far short of meeting basic nutritional needs. And these are the people who are probably in the high end of, the top, whatever, 20%, top 10% of healthy diets, and they're not meeting their nutritional needs from food. So
Do you think they're just doing that because they're not eating enough per se of certain things, or why do you think they're falling below that?
yeah, it's a great question. For some people, it is because they are starving themselves. So a lot of people go through binge and purge. So, and it's often related to weight, although not exclusively. So it's like, okay, I need to lose weight, so I'm going to start skipping breakfast and, having a light lunch, and then because they're hungry, then they snack on things. And then, yeah, obviously, if you're eating, say, 1,200 calories or 1,500 calories, it's going to be more difficult to get all your micronutrient needs and your protein needs, for instance, than if you're eating 2,000 or 2,500 calories, just because you're eating less food. So that is absolutely a factor. The problem with that as well, of course, is it's not sustainable without drugs. So if you're on drugs, whether it's amphetamines or Ozempic or whatever, you can kind of keep yourself on a starvation level of calories for a long time, like many, many months, even years. But otherwise, it doesn't work. So people go from not eating enough calories, which means it's almost impossible to get all their nutritional needs met, But then after a while, their kind of unconscious mind, whatever you want to call it, takes over, and then they start binging on things when they break their diet, when they treat themselves, when whatever. But then generally, the things they binge on are probably high on some stuff they need, like calories, often carbs and fats, but still not high in the micronutrients. And so they kind of cycle between not enough macronutrients, too many macronutrients, not enough macronutrients, too many macronutrients. But what's the unifying factor is that with both of those periods, whether it's binge or purge, it's not enough micronutrients. Not enough micronutrients when they are eating healthily because they're not having enough calories, and then not enough micronutrients when they are binging on junk food because it's junk food. So they really lose out in that sense. So I think that's one big thing. I think a lot of it as well is just lack of awareness. So not everyone is on that kind of destructive cycle of binging and purging. A lot of people are on a steady calorie diet, but they just don't realize, and they have a lot of false ideas in their head about what is nutritious and also what is bad for you. One example would be that I know I was guilty of as well, that we've been fed this idea that superfoods are generally like fruits and vegetables, that these are the most nutritionally dense foods. And so fruits and vegetables, especially certain fruits and vegetables, which are known as being superfoods, whether blueberries, broccoli, whatever you might call it, they often have specific phytonutrients in them at high levels, anthocyanins in blueberries or sulforaphane in broccoli or whatever. But what they certainly don't have in large quantities is actual nutrients. So the essential nutrients that your body requires and cannot make its own. So just as a brief recap, that is the amino acids, the protein, the fats, the vitamins, and the minerals. Those are the things that your body cannot make itself and needs in order to survive. So no one's ever died from an anthocyanin deficiency, but you can absolutely die from a vitamin B1 deficiency or a magnesium deficiency or any deficiency. So, if it's an essential nutrient, that means by definition that you must have it. And so a lot of the time, the plant-based foods, people who are just having a smoothie in the morning or something like that, it's high in certain nutrients. Like say if you have a fruit and vegetable smoothie, it's going to be high in carbohydrate. It's going to be high in potassium. It's going to be high in vitamin C. It's going to be high in some stuff, but it's going to be low in a lot of other stuff. And so I think that's another thing. Whereas the things that are most nutritionally dense, ironically, are often things that people avoid.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. And without taking a look of actually lining everything up to really see the micronutrients, we actually don't really know. We think we're eating healthy per se, most of us, but unless we get that scorecard out and really tally it up, we have no idea.
No, and a lot of it is based, as I say, on hearsay, on different people's opinions, on maybe looking at lists of what are the most nutritious foods, and according to Google, these are the top 10 most nutritious foods. I'm eating 8 of them every day. How can I be low? But of course you can be, because the facts are often very different from the marketing, as it were, of these different foods. So you don't know for sure until you actually check. That's 100% the case, Christian. That's the number one thing that I want to get across. And of course, in the second half of this episode, we will give examples of that. But I will start off with some general principles, if I may.
Beautiful. Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. So the first thing is, I always guide people that it's important to eat meals and not snacks. Now, the meals can be plentiful. Let's say if you are, doing heavy weightlifting and cardio 3 to 4 hours a day, maybe you're having 6 meals a day. That's possible if you're like an athlete in training, or if you're a bodybuilder or something. That's fine. But I encourage people to have meals. I encourage people to, if you're going to skip a meal, there are cases where it is a good idea to skip a meal potentially. It should always be the last meal, not the first meal. The first meal of the day gets your blood sugar and keeps your blood sugar balanced. It replenishes your supply of energy, which will have been depleted throughout the night sleeping. It also sets the tone of how you feel to some degree. This is getting a little bit complicated, but for instance, if you have a meal which I would encourage, which is at least high-ish protein, as opposed to a meal of just mostly carbs, which is what is often common these days, it will put you on a better path, like in relation to hormones and neurotransmitters. You'll have more dopamine, for instance, if you make sure you have plenty of protein in your first meal, as opposed to just having carbs, which will set you off on more like of a serotonin thing. So there's lots and lots of reasons to not skip that first meal, in most cases to have it fairly soon after waking up, and this is the most important, have a balance of macronutrients in there. And then to have another meal, hopefully 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe something like that hours later, not to snack in between, because it's, as your grandmother may have told you, ruins your appetite for the next meal. And then probably, unless you are trying to lose weight, if you're trying to lose weight, then probably like the last meal will be the smallest meal. Maybe you'll skip that last meal. But if you're going to skip any meal, it would be that last one. Now, I know this is counterintuitive to a lot of people because they do the opposite. They don't, for several reasons. They don't want to eat the first meal because they're not hungry. They don't want to eat the first meal because they feel like if they don't eat, they have more energy than if they do eat. We talked about this in another episode. I probably shouldn't go over it all again. But, in a nutshell, if you have less energy after eating than before eating, that means that you have a digestive issue that needs to be resolved, because food should be a source of energy. And if for you it's the source of sedation, you're either having the wrong food, which is quite common, which we're talking about now, or your body is not able to deal with that food like it should be able to. And you're probably running an adrenaline and cortisol and stress, and that needs to be addressed. And so, I know this is supposed to be more for practitioners. So for practitioners, my opinion would be to guide people on that. And probably the category of people who I speak to are the most guilty of this actually is practitioners, like especially doctors. They're often skipping meals and all the rest of it. So you're going to have to maybe preach something different than you practice if if you want to help your clients. So yeah, I would say guiding people on that. Now, I say all that to say this, to go back to the point, we're talking about nutritional density here. Every meal should have a balance of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. There shouldn't be just a piece of fruit or just a piece of toast or whatever. So if we get that, then the next question is, so I would base the meal around protein. So that's the first thing, because fat is easy, carbs are easy. The protein is usually the challenge. A lot of people will forget having, a significant amount of protein. So there's various reasons for that. I've already touched upon a couple of them, but I want to bring up another one now, which is more relevant to this episode, which is that the most nutritionally dense foods are almost always the high protein foods. I'm going to say almost in case I think of any exceptions during this episode, but pretty much always, actually. So, and people often get this wrong in terms of not really being clear on what the order is. So I would say the order is this. Now, I'm not saying that this is the order of preference of protein for every single person, because everyone's different. Different people have different needs. Different people have different issues with allergies and digestion and all the rest of it. But let's assume that you are optimal. You have, a Wolverine-like digestive system where everything is great for you and you have no problem with anything. Well, then the most nutritionally dense foods are probably shellfish and fatty fish. That's going to be your number one source of nutrition. And so shellfish, I'm talking about things like oysters, mussels, scallops, things like that. If we just look at the amount of nutrition versus calorie ratio, it's extremely good. Now, sorry, I phrased that slightly incorrectly, because technically with the vegetables, often the nutrition to calorie ratio is really good because they've got almost no calories in. They're like mainly water and fiber. Um, so I would say it's nutrition to digestive capacity. That's more how I would look at it, because this is a challenge. Let me explain that. So if you have a meal, let's say of just salad, let's just say green leaves, right? You're going to have a lot of nutrients compared to calories. The ratio of nutrients to calorie is going to be very high. But the problem is you're going to have you're going to be full up, like your digestive capacity will be satiated before you've had enough calories, and also before you've had enough protein, which is super important, probably before you've had enough carbs and fat as well. So this is obviously a strategy, again, that's recommended for weight loss, right? Just fill up on salads. This is what a lot of people do because it is bulky. The fiber in there will absorb even more water and actually expand. And it's true, if you eat, I used to do this when I was a raw vegan back in 15 years ago. If you eat a big enough bowl of basically green leaves and cucumber and stuff like that, you will feel full. But you will not be satiated because you have not had actual calories, and you've had some nutrients, admittedly. As I said, it's reasonably nutrient dense, but still not as much as the type of food that I'm going to recommend. So we all have a limited digestive capacity. There is a big variance with that. Some people have strong, large stomachs that produce a lot of stomach acid. Those people can definitely get away with more low calorie, high nutrient foods, like say salads, vegetables, stuff like that, fruits even, without like overfilling themselves before they've met their needs for other nutrients, like say protein. Some people have smaller stomachs and they got to be careful with that. And of course, the average person is in between. But I'm focused on making sure you get as much nutrients as possible with your digestive capacity first. And then if you have a big stomach that can easily handle more, then you can put some more high water and fiber but low calorie foods on top of it, like salads or fruit or whatever.
How can somebody determine what their digestive capacity is?
I mean, this is pretty easy. If like say you're having a meal with about 12 people, there'll be some people who 10 minutes later have like finished off a huge plate for food and are ordering dessert. There'll be other people who are, picking at it, and 30 minutes later they're still only halfway through the plate. This reveals itself reasonably easily. Now, of course, there are other factors there, like the more stressed you are, the more quickly you eat and stuff like that. But still, overall, if you can eat a large quantity of food, have no digestive discomfort, if you're always hungry, these are signs of having a lot of stomach acid and a large stomach. And that's why for some people, like a lap band surgery, I'm not recommending it, but this is, obviously where the reduce the size of the stomach. That's a very brute force way of just reducing the capacity of a person to eat. Even, Ozempic, semaglutide, all these kind of things that I've been highly critical of. I would say the type of person if they make sense to anyone, the type of person they may make the most sense for is that kind of person. The person who has a super strong stomach, produces a lot of stomach acid, has very good intestinal motility. There's an argument to be made that maybe taking a little bit of a GLP-1 agonist, like semaglutide, to slow all that down a bit, just to bring it back into balance, makes sense. Of course, most people don't do that. They take a lot. They reduce their stomach capacity too much. They slow down their motility too much, and they create different problems. But that is the kind of person that argument could be made for, that those kind of drugs have some value. And I think it explains why some people do get good results with them. Obviously, not everyone has bad results. So that stomach capacity is, an important thing to be aware of. Functional medicine wise, the answer to that question would be often would be to do a trial of betaine hydrochloride to test adding stomach acid in and seeing if the person's digestion gets better, or even if they just don't notice. If the person has good, strong stomach acid production, if you add in even one capsule of betaine hydrochloride, it will burn and it will feel uncomfortable. Whereas if a person does not, they can often have a lot, like 7. I've seen even people with 10 capsules and they don't feel anything. It's because they're so low in making their own stomach acid. So yeah, that would be, more of a practitioner way of testing that. And of course, you can actually There's real tests for that. You can put a digital monitoring capsule thing and have the person swallow it, and it'll actually measure the stomach acid, or there's stuff like that as well. But most practitioners watching this probably don't have access to that technology, and it's unnecessarily invasive. So, all right, back to nutrient density. So the most nutrient dense food, nutrients versus digestive capacity utilized, would be the high protein foods. And as I said, at the very top of it, like most nutrients, would be probably your shellfish and your fatty fish. So, and these are often things that are recommended as healthy, right? Your oysters, your salmon, and obviously with these things you have to get a high quality version. I know some people are against these because they do have more toxins in, because the sea is so dirty these days. I'm not arguing with that right now. That's a different episode maybe, but I'm just saying it's very high in nutrition. Um, the other thing that's very high in nutrition would be certain organs, like the liver, for instance. Now, I'm not a fan of that. Obviously, some people are because of the level of toxins in there again. So again, I'm not going to argue about that in this episode, but that would be, another example of a very high nutritional source of use of utilization of digestive capacity. I'll try and remember to say it that way. So that would be number one. Number two, from my experience, would be beef and bison and venison, and kind of closely followed by lamb. And I'm picking really here on like commonly available foods, right? So I'm not going to say crocodile or kangaroo or anything like that. Just pick on the foods that most people in the English-speaking world. Ostrich.
Just, yeah.
I mean, honestly, they are all available. I actually bought all those things in England, but most people are not finding them in the supermarket. So we'll just we'll stick with the common foods. So yeah, so shellfish, fatty fish, number one. Organ meats very closely behind. Then followed just by normal meat like beef, bison, and venison, closely followed by lamb. These are very highly nutritious. And the episode that we did a while ago where we talked about, where we gave examples of chronometer, I was showing how a diet with just beef and I think potato is one example I picked, like it actually has well over 100% of the recommended daily allowance of almost every nutrient. It's amazing how nutritious just beef can be. Honestly, it's still missing a few nutrients, and that's really where, like, a diet, let's say, with sardines and mussels and oysters every day is going to be even more nutrient dense than a diet of beef every day, because really those shellfish and fatty fish have pretty much everything in there, even vitamin D and things that's quite rare to have in any kind of food, vitamin D3. But the beef is pretty close. Beef is pretty good as well. Now, the next one after that, I would say would be chicken, poultry, I guess in general. Chicken is not as nutritious as beef. I would say it's about half as nutritious. Again, looking at the facts.
And when you're basing that on that comparison, is it because of the micronutrients needs that versus what beef is providing versus what chicken is providing? And is
Exactly.
that down? Okay. And is that down, would you say, down to what they are eating themselves, those animals?
When I ask people the question, where do you get your health news? A lot of people are like, oh, I don't know. Or they name, like, they have to go to a lot of different places. And I was actually in the same boat, which is why I decided, let's create a health news show. So I'm excited to announce that starting Saturday, the 25th of January, we're going to be doing weekly live news shows at 3 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. UK time. We'll be talking about the latest changes in regulations, which is very exciting because I think 2025 there's going to be some big and hopefully positive shifts in the maybe 100-year trajectory we've had of regulations kind of creating chronic illnesses. We're going to talk about the biggest breakthroughs in scientific discoveries in the area of health, longevity, rejuvenation. And we'll be doing a kind of cultural section as well, where we talk about some of the most interesting, the wackiest, the most fun, the most viral trends in the health world as well. So to check all of that out, check out my new health news show, Elwin Robinson's Health News Show, every Saturday live on YouTube. And if you want to make sure you get notifications for that, go to my website, feelyounger.net. Just subscribe there, and I do weekly emails once a week, and in my weekly email I'll send you a reminder and send you a link to the next episode. Hopefully I will see you there. Yeah, partly, but it's partly just the nature of the beast, as it were. Because a cow fed mainly grains and a chicken fed mainly grains, the cow is still going to be, significantly more nutritious. Just in the same way that some plants are more nutritious than others, just based on the nature of the plant. Um, so, so yeah. Now this distinction about chicken is chicken. Actually, I missed one there. I actually put pork ahead of chicken slightly. So it's went beef first, then lamb, then pork, then chicken. By the time we get to chicken, I'd say it has about half as much. And now I'd say, again, this is just an opinion. We'll give an example of this in a minute. We'll actually show you. But yeah, there is significantly less nutrition in there. This is important to understand because a lot of people are eating chicken instead of beef or instead of lamb or whatever because they think it's healthier. Now, if you really just prefer chicken, if beef disagrees with you, if you find chicken easier to digest, if it's more easily available, if it's more affordable, there could be loads of reasons that you would pick chicken over beef, right? I'm not saying that you should never do that, but what I'm saying is I would not do it for the reason that it's healthier.
Hmm.
First of all, chicken and pork are both have to be fed some kind of omega-6 containing grains or soy. So they're going to be higher in not just omega-6, but a specific type of omega-6 called arachidonic acid, which is the most inflammatory type of omega-6, which is generally only found in animal foods. Um, and arachidonic acid is one of the criticisms of eating animal foods that vegans and vegetarians will make, which is accurate. um, and so we do want to reduce arachidonic acid in our diet in most cases. And so, as I said, chicken and pork will be high in it, and especially grass-fed, but even non-grass-fed beef and lamb will be relatively lower in it. So that would be a good reason as well. But yeah, as we'll see, we'll look at this. I think probably most of what we'll do here is look at different types of protein, and we'll compare the relative nutrition of it after I've given this general guidance. After that, I would probably say eggs. I know egg yolks are quite nutritious, but egg whites aren't, and I'm treating them as one whole unit. So egg white is basically just
It's just
uh,
protein, isn't it?
protein and water. Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's and it actually has something that blocks biotin, which is important.
Oh,
Uh,
does it?
yeah,
Okay.
well, sorry, only if it's raw. Only if it's raw,
Right, right, right.
which is not that common. Um, yeah, so forget that. But anyway, it's not very nutritionally dense. So even once you add the egg yolk in, I would argue chicken is better. But again, we'll see. We'll have a look in a minute, and we'll see if my opinions hold up. I haven't researched any of this to prepare for this episode. This is all based on the normal advice that I give to people. And then after that, there would be dairy, cheese, yogurt, all this kind of stuff. These are good sources of amino acids, but they're relatively poor in micronutrients, except for calcium, phosphorus, and potentially vitamin K2. But they're certainly not very nutritionally dense as sources of protein. So I would ideally not base a meal around that form of protein. And then we get into the kind of plant forms, and so then there's seeds, beans, nuts. Ideally, we're probably not basing a meal around that protein source because although some of them are more nutritionally dense than others, they do contain more anti-nutrients, which block the absorption of various nutrients. So while on paper they may not look as deficiently low as I'm indicating here, the problem is they are usually less well absorbed. Now, obviously, if you're a vegetarian,
I was
um,
just going to bring up that point. Yeah. How is that vegetarian going to meet their needs?
I would say through supplementation. And I have been saying this all along. I said this in one of my first ever articles that was published in a printed magazine back in 2010 was like when I was a vegan and I was telling vegans they need to supplement zinc. um, and I haven't really changed so I'm saying this. I'm not saying this now because my diet's changed or whatever. Like I have been very consistent on this because the facts speak for themselves. If you're going to go without now, obviously, eggs are definitely better than dairy in this regard. So, if you are an ovo vegetarian, then you definitely have more scope, but than a vegan. But still, in terms of zinc, it's not helping too much. Eggs or dairy either. Um, then yeah, like supplementation definitely becomes more important. We could perhaps do a different episode on that, Chrissy. About it's actually a good idea for a topic for an episode. I don't know if too many of our viewers are vegetarian, but they may have vegetarian friends or family or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
well, my daughter's a vegetarian, so I'm always worried about her getting enough protein, because otherwise it tends to be from a lot of soy products or other kind of things. So I'm like, okay, how can we
yeah, we
get some
should.
more into you?
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, children. Yeah, yeah, we should definitely talk about that then. Like, I don't think protein is much of an issue. Like, you can easily get all the amino acids from plant-based foods. All the vegetarians and vegans who say that's a non-issue are technically correct from my view. But the issue is the other nutrients. It's the stuff that we're talking about this time. So it's funny, every time you need some protein, you need some protein. It's like, no, what you actually probably need is zinc or heme iron or vitamin B12, or like there's something that is not in the, or maybe specific amino acids like carnosine or carnitine or something like that is not, or choline, something that's, not really found in most plant foods. But it's probably not the protein itself. The protein is actually fine. All the vegans who claim that, I'd say, are accurate. You can get plenty of protein from plant foods. The issue is more like the nutrient density. And again, absorbable nutrients. A lot of these lectin containing foods, your seeds, whether it's grains, pulses, beans, nuts, whatever, they do have sometimes a reasonable nutritional profile, but the problem is things like phytates, lectins, the anti-nutrients that block the level of absorption of those nutrients to some degree, oxalates, all of these kind of things that make them less nutritionally dense than they seem. So back to this optimal, like helping people get as much as their nutrients as possible from diet. What I advise people is, so meals, again, ideally at least 3 times a day, even if that last meal is a small meal, right? If you're trying to lose weight, and then uh, pick the highest nutritional form of protein that agrees with you, that you can tolerate, that you can tolerate the taste of, whatever, and have it with every meal. And I like every meal, not one meal a day, right? So having one meal where it's like a bowl of fruit and toast, or like cereal and milk or something like that, and then another meal where it's like a cheese on toast, and then the last meal you're having chicken or something like that. Then you've got like no nutrient dense protein, a not nutrient dense protein, and then a barely nutrient dense protein, right? So of course you're not, and again, you'll see this yourself if you test it, and we'll give an example. That you'll see that people do not get enough nutrients when they are eating that way. You got to get one of these things with every meal if you actually want to meet your recommended daily allowance, recommended daily intake, 100% of every nutrient or as close as possible from food. So the ironic thing that I found is the people who whine and complain about how they don't want to have supplements and everything should be, you should be able to get everything from whole foods, are actually less likely to eat this way than the average person, almost. Because the average person, okay, maybe the average person these days, a lot of the time they have, maybe a crappy breakfast of cornflakes or something like that, but they'll often have, like a bacon sandwich for lunch and, like a burger for dinner or something like that, right? So they're getting some degree of nutrient density, even if it's not the best quality. Um, so yeah. So in order to get nutrient density, what you really want is to pick the most nutrient dense protein to go with every meal. If you do, and have a reasonable amount of it. So like sardines are very nutritious, for instance. I often recommend them. They're very low in toxins as well, like heavy metals, mercury, stuff like that, compared to the bigger fish. So that's a good one, and they're cheap. So that's a good one that I recommend. But obviously, if you're having like less than one tin, I think one of those little tins that you peel open is usually like about 80 grams of actual fish. So if you're having half a tin, that's 40 grams. So that's still not going to be a huge amount of nutrition just because it's not a lot of sardines, full stop, you know? But if you're having a decent portion, so depending on your size and all the rest of it, maybe between 100 and 150 grams, which is, roughly 4 to 6 ounces of uh, high nutrition animal food, as like eggs, okay-ish, right? So let's say like eggs for breakfast, maybe with a sausage, even better. And then burger for lunch, cheeseburger, something like that, and then fish for dinner, fish and whatever, rice, vegetables, potatoes, etc. for dinner. That will often get, let's say it's a good fish, a salmon. That will get you very close to being like over 100% of every nutrient. It's amazing like how easy that is. That's the number one determining factor. As soon as you start leaving that stuff out, and I'm not saying you can't have cheese or whatever or dairy, but I'm saying that really should be like on top of these rather than instead of, because it's really not very nutritionally dense other than with a couple of nutrients as we talked about. So I would say this has so many benefits. Obviously, there's huge amounts of benefits from having as many nutrients as possible coming from food, as we've just talked about. But I would say a unfocused on benefit of this, maybe even by me as well, is how beneficial this is for weight loss. Because when you eat this way of what I've just said, you feel satiated because you actually have met all your nutritional needs. Even just high protein meals tend to be more satiating than any other type of meals. But when you stack very nutritionally dense on top of high protein meals, it's so easy not to snack. It's so easy not to indulge in treats and cheats and cheat meals and all this kind of thing. Like, you just don't want it and you don't need it when you meet your nutrients. Now, that's on a biochemical level. Obviously, there could be emotional reasons why you still, do other stuff, and that's kind of different. But even they will have the force reduced. So let's say, you love eating chocolate cake because your mother used to get it for you and you associate it with bonding with her or something like that. Okay, all of that may still be true. But if you are satiated by having a high protein, high nutrient meal, the charge around wanting that will still be less because you'll still feel full on a bodily level, even if there is that emotional thing that still exists. So I think this is a really, really great strategy for even weight loss. And I've, seen that consistently as well.
Beautiful. Well, that's a really good rundown. I mean, you've made me contemplate the protein sources that I am bringing into my diet when you label it out like that. Because I mean, I've just kind of reached for, egg whites, they're fast, they're quick, with eggs as well. It's quick and it's easy. But when you're looking at it on a scale of, whether nutrient dense or not, then that's going to make me question, be like, actually, maybe I need to substitute that for something else that's going to give me more of an opportunity to meet those micronutrient needs that I wouldn't have been meeting.
Yeah, it's great. And it's not too difficult to do, right? You can, there are fairly quick fast food versions of, the stuff I've talked about. Obviously, like a burger or a beef sausage is a fairly easy way, or, I mean, even simpler than that. Just like you can get pre-sliced kind of ham, you can get pre-sliced beef, like, I can't remember what it's called right now. Maybe you remember, Chrissy, but like sandwich beef, right?
Right. Yeah, you've got the roast beef or the pastrami or things like that. So,
Yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Where you just throw it on, throw it in a sandwich. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. And ditto, obviously, as I said, chicken is better than a lot of other options. So, that's still potentially a way of going about it. And people think of the shellfish and the fish as being like, super challenging. But again, they don't have to be. So, prawns are probably not the most nutritious, but a lot of places will have, like a prawn cocktail sandwich again, if you're going like the super, convenient route. Um, and if you're cooking at home, like cooking things like scallops is really not a lot of work. It's like you put them in, you sear them for 1 minute on one side, flip them over a minute on the other side, done. Like this is not like a super challenging thing to do. It's kind of like cooking a rare steak, but actually just even quicker.
Yeah.
Um, and even like, if we're talking about a salmon or anything like that, then you can uh, wrap it in greaseproof paper, put a little bit of lemon juice or even just water in there, and cook it in an oven, or if you have an air fryer or anything like that, for 10-15 minutes. Take it out and it's done. It's like poached. So these are not things that people get very uptight about, like cooking things as if it's like a real big challenge. And it can be if you make it complicated, as some chefs do to try and impress you or whatever. But actually, I think every single thing that I talked about can be made very simply. With beef, you can just make burgers. With fish, you can just poach it. Um, this doesn't have to be a big challenge that it's often presented as.
Very true. Very true. Right. So I think right now you're gonna pull up some meal plans that people have, and we're gonna dive into those, correct, and look at what those individuals' needs are if they're being met. Genetic Insights provides cutting-edge, affordable DNA testing, giving you access to over 500 health reports that can help you in 3 key ways. They may be able to resolve your existing health challenges even when nothing else has worked. Using simple lifestyle changes, their reports can help you reduce your risk of developing future health challenges that you may be genetically predisposed to. And they can help you feel more confident in your health by showing you where you are genetically strong. Unlike most other genetic health testing companies, Genetic Insights tests over 83 million different variations in your genes, guaranteeing 99.7% accuracy across all of their DNA reports. They cover almost every aspect of health, including digestive issues, cardiovascular health, weight loss, hormonal and blood sugar balance, as well as nutrient needs, allergies and intolerances, and so much more. Using their system is quick and easy, and reading the reports is simple. If you've done an Ancestry DNA test, you can simply download your raw DNA data, upload it to the Genetic Insights platform, and within a few hours you will have access to genetic reports which give you a risk score for each specific issue and scientifically validated recommendations based on your individual genetic profile. Everything in your reports are based on scientific studies, and there are citation links throughout every report. If you are serious about optimizing your health and wellness and feeling great, then getting access to your Genetic Insights reports may be the most important health investment you will ever make. In the reports, not only will you gain insights into how to overcome existing health challenges and avoid future issues, you'll also discover which types of dietary, lifestyle, and even supplement protocols are best for your unique genetics. To get your unique genetic health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and use code REJUVENATE to get 20% off today. That's geneticinsights.co using coupon code REJUVENATE to get 20% off today.
Okay, and with salmon, so this is one of those things that is often described as a superfood that I would say it's probably one of the few ones that actually is accurate. You can see it as like good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6, very high omega-3. And obviously it's got a good amount of protein. But if we get to those micronutrients, so we can see like 80% of B1, 130.
Now that's a difference from what we've seen.
Yeah, 130% of B2, 226% of B3, basically close to or well over 100% of all the B vitamins, except for folate as usual, because it's more plant-based. Even has high levels of vitamin D, 400% of vitamin D, 90% of vitamin E. That's very rare in non-plant foods we talked about, so that's pretty impressive as well. And with the minerals, it's a bit more lacking there with some of them, like some crucial ones like zinc, which is where I wouldn't have only salmon. And this is where usually when a seafood diet agrees with people, I do recommend more like having quite a large variety of seafoods. As much as salmon is pretty good, it's still lacking in some areas. Magnesium as well is only 40%, for instance, but very high in selenium, 300%. So yeah, some variation. Whereas with beef, people can just have beef 3 times a day and basically be pretty good. So I would say salmon is a good staple though. And of course, I chose like a wild salmon here. But yeah, 70% copper, 25% iron, 40% magnesium, 80% potassium, 300% selenium, 25% zinc. And now again, this is not like a meal. This is like you're getting that percentage I just keep reading out of your total daily needs just from the protein source. That's the point I'm trying to emphasize. And if we compare that to a lot of people are not getting as much nutrition as I just listed there just from salmon. So having salmon and an average size fillet of salmon with your meal 3 times a day, or maybe smoked salmon sometimes or whatever, is more nutrition than most people get from all the food they eat throughout the day. So yeah, salmon does deserve its reputation. If we go back to some of the other examples, so I talked about prawns. And part of the reason I recommend the shellfish as well is because a lot of people see them as a treat, right? Like it's, tasty food. And so put in 450. And prawns particularly, pretty easy to get usually. So decent amount of protein again. Not super high on the B vitamins, pretty low in a lot of them. 50% of niacin, 50% of B6, 100% of B12, 100% of choline.
Choline, yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty impressive. 25% of folate, pretty low in C, D, and E, and K as usual. 30% of calcium, 85% of copper, 43% of magnesium, 13% of iron, 33% of potassium, 300% of selenium, 50% of zinc. So in terms of minerals, the most important minerals, just as a reminder, are that a lot of people have deficiencies of are zinc, selenium, potassium, molybdenum, but that's never listed, so I'll ignore that. So zinc, magnesium, potassium, selenium, iron for some people, and calcium. Those are the ones that I most focus on. So you can see with the shellfish, a lot of the time they have a decent level of at least some of those. In the case of oysters, of course, they're especially high in zinc. In the case of mussels, they're especially high in iron. And that's why it is kind of good to cycle through those different seafood sources if seafood is your primary protein, or just include some seafood, obviously, if you're more of an omnivore, if you like to have a little bit of everything. So if we compare them to liver, obviously I've had some things to say about liver, and I don't necessarily recommend it because the amount of poisons that accumulate in the liver. But as a nutrient source, the reason why everyone likes to say that it's nutritionally dense, let's just review that.
Wow, the most protein I think we've seen.
So it's even, yeah, absolutely, high in protein. So not very high in B1, 60%, but yeah, 900% of B2, 400% of B3, 300%
Wow.
of B5, 230% of B6, 5,300% of B12.
And 2,800 of vitamin A.
Yeah, and that's possibly the problem, right? Because that is an amount of vitamin A that if you were to have this much liver every day, you would get ill, I think, even by mainstream standards, and I think no one's recommending that, to be fair to everyone. But yeah, so it is nutritionally dense. If, we lived in a different world where there was not as much toxic accumulation, and maybe our bodies were more able to handle more vitamin A because our bodies were not so toxic, maybe, it would be a good source. Actually, not as high as the minerals as I remember. Super, super high in copper, which, like vitamin A, is very problematic again if you have too much of it. So that's the other big warning about copper. 3,200% of copper. Not very high on iron and manganese, phosphorus 200%, selenium, zinc. not that great for minerals. More of a B vitamins, vitamin A, copper are like the ones that are extremely high. And as I say, B vitamins good, vitamin A, copper, possibly not so much. And in terms of organs, actually, I think I picked another one here. Oh no, I didn't, but I'll just do it now. Just look at heart as an interesting point of comparison. So heart, beef heart, is something that is pretty easy to get hold of. I do actually recommend people who like to eat, primarily beef diet, which I know some of our viewers do, to get some heart in some of the time, even if I'm not a fan of some of the other organs. So heart is an organ, but it's mainly a muscle, and so it doesn't accumulate toxins in the same way that things like liver and kidney do. So it's got a decent amount of protein, but we can see not very high in B1. A lot of foods aren't, but 320% of B2, 150% of B3, 70% of B5, 55% of B6, 800% of B12, 187% of choline, very high on choline, which of course is very important for lots of things. Low on folate, low in most of the other vitamins, and then good level of zinc, good level of selenium, good level of iron, good level of copper. Pretty nutritious, but not massively more so than just ground beef. The one thing that, it's actually the two things that are in heart which aren't listed here, which might make it worth adding, is it's high in coenzyme Q10 and it's high in taurine, the amino acid. However, neither of those are listed in the chronometer. So let's just look at normal beef. So just a normal ground beef. So this is not, overly expensive or outside of anyone's reach, hopefully. If we have 450 grams of that a day, then what are we talking about in terms of nutrition? So we're talking about 120 grams of protein. Again, for most people, that's more than enough just from that. But we're talking about 11% B1, 45% B2, 117% B3, 28% B5, 78% B6, 186% B12, 70% of choline, not very high in the rest of the vitamins, and then 17% copper, 72% iron, 23% magnesium, 87% phosphorus, 38% potassium, 138% selenium, 199% zinc. So it's pretty good. I would say I'd put this kind of on a par with a little bit lower than salmon, which is why I technically said for the oily fish are better. Maybe on more of a par of sardines, something like that. But again, like if this is all you're eating, then obviously you got some holes there. But the point is, this is a lot of nutrition just from one central, point. Now, if we look at what else? So let's look at my favorite steak, which I eat whenever I can, like a filet steak. Is that any different?
Yeah, that's a great question that you bring up. Like, are there different cuts, different ways that it's processed? Does that change the nutritional needs of what you're ingesting?
It does a bit, yeah. Some people prefer the ground beef because it has more collagen in, so it has more of certain amino acids like glycine. So that is, a good reason to have those kind of things. But as you can see, the steak does have higher nutrients overall. So we're talking about 20% B1, 43% B2, 120% B3, 90% B6, 128% B12, 95% choline. I think we just saw 70% for the other one. So yeah, like the steak overall does have a little bit more in, but it's pretty marginal. It's certainly not worth the extra money unless you're doing it for reasons of taste. So now if we look at, what did I say is the next most nutritious? Lamb, right? So we'll have a look at that. So we'll see just some 450 grams of lamb. We had lamb 3 times a day. Little bit less protein because it's more fat. Lamb is always more fatty no matter what cut. In this case, I just picked ground up lamb. But again, it's pretty good. So B1, 27%, B2, 63%, B3, 138%, B5, 31%, B6, 29%, B12, 200%, choline, 72%, folate, 23%. Actually has a bit of vitamin K, 25% vitamin K. Calcium 9%, copper 24%, iron 49%, magnesium 25%, potassium 32%, selenium 168%, zinc 156%. Yeah, it's pretty marginal. It's probably a little bit less nutritious than steak, but actually probably just as nutritious as the minced beef, looking at it. And again, slightly different nutritional profiles, which is why, even if you're a red meat lover, it is good to have a bit of variety, right? Ideally.
Yeah, I think sometimes too as well. It's just the variety, like you mentioned just there. It is nice to change it up just a touch for texture. I do like to do that personally.
Absolutely. Let's do pork as well. So let's do bacon. Everyone seems to love bacon. I've never liked it personally, but a lot of people do. So what about if you had bacon 3 times a day? The dreaded bacon,
Ooh.
right? That everyone says is so bad for you. Let's have a look. So, it's a large amount of fat. I'll give it that. 157 grams, 158 grams of fat. Unless you are trying to be ketogenic, then, that's probably a challenge. 153 grams of protein, plenty of protein as well. The reason for that, of course, is bacon is cured and dried, so it's got way less water content than anything else we've looked at so far. So it is just, very calorie dense. So you probably wouldn't actually have 450 grams because that would be an insane amount of calories. In fact, yeah, over 2,000 calories just from bacon. So actually, let's change that up a bit. Let's change it to 200 grams maybe, so it's a more realistic amount. Okay, so that means you're getting less protein, only 67. So that is one of the challenges with pork in general, and bacon specifically, is the high amount of fat that is using up the digestive capacity as compared to nutrients. Pork is famously iron B1, and sure enough, even though I just changed it to only 200 grams, it's still 75% of your B1 needs. 27% of B2, 100% of B3, 22% of B5, 53% of B6, 36% of B12, 32% of choline. So we can see, and if we go to pork, if we go to the minerals, zinc 40%, selenium 140%, potassium 28%, magnesium 15%, iron 10%, copper 10%, calcium 2%. So you can see why I said it's less nutritious than lamb and beef, but still not bad in its own way. And certainly throwing a couple of bits of, bacon on top of a burger or something like that, people like to do, right?
Exactly.
Nothing necessarily wrong with that from a nutritional point of view. Now, let's look at quick look at cheese. I just picked, normal cheddar cheese. Again, because the high amount of fat in there, I think it's probably not realistic to be getting 450 grams. But let's say, let's pick 300 grams. So it's like 100 grams, which is 1,200 calories. Yes, that's roughly equivalent to what we did with bacon. So if you were to have 100 grams of cheese every meal as your primary protein source, which is not outside the realm of possibility, especially if you're a lacto vegetarian, right? Then what are you getting nutrition-wise? So that's 68 grams of protein. Not that much because it's also 100 grams of fat. That is one of the challenges with bacon and cheese, and to some degree even, obviously fatty cuts of the other meats, but we didn't pick those, is that there is a lot of fat using up that digestive capacity compared to how much nutrition you're getting. So with cheese, you've got 5% of B1, 75% of B2, no B3, 12% B5, 9% B6, 55% B12, 9% choline, 20% folate, 67% vitamin A, if that's something you want, 18% vitamin D, 10% vitamin E, 210% calcium. As I said, that's one of the main reasons you'd want to go for dairy, because nothing else we've looked at has had that much calcium, and nothing else we're going to look at has that much calcium. That's really what dairy is the king of, is calcium. Almost 100% of iodine. People don't realize that. They associate iodine with seafood, accurately so, but it is also high in dairy. And you can get, if you eat a high dairy diet, you do not need any other iodine source. But yeah, only 2% of iron, 20% magnesium, 6% potassium, 120% selenium. Again, people often don't realize that, but cheese, dairy is often high in selenium as well. Depends a little bit about the source. And about 72% zinc as well. So, not bad, but definitely not great. And it's really the fat portion of it that makes it, less of a nutritious option. Just as is the case with most pork.
Yeah, I think as well too within the protein structures of trying to balance out, like if you're having a salmon and you're having the cheese, is that balance, that ratio within your macros as well. Especially if you're somebody who likes to eat, a bit on the lower side of fat instead of a higher fat diet.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But it's also how many calories that uses up, So that's one of the reasons I'd put shellfish at the top, even though, as we saw, it's maybe not as nutritious as the salmon or the beef, because the shellfish are often like no fat. So in terms of just how much digestive capacity they're using in terms of calories, like the calorie to, and let's say the protein to nutrition ratio is still very high, even compared to the beef and salmon. So with chicken breast, this is probably the number one favorite source of protein throughout the whole world, I believe. This has become, the most popular source of protein, I think. So obviously, protein-wise, this is accurate. So 450 grams of cooked chicken breast, I picked here. 140 grams of protein, so definitely high in protein. So B1, 20%, B2, 30%, B3, 280%, B5, 40%, B6, 135%, B12, 25%, choline, 68%, folate, 5%, vitamin C, none, vitamin D, 5%, vitamin E, 6%, vitamin K, 2%, calcium, 7%, copper, 11%, iron, 26%, magnesium, 30%, potassium 31%, selenium 150%, zinc 36%. So you can see not bad, but if we look at the key things like zinc, it's only got 37% and you're not likely to get that much from anything else if this is your primary animal food, Iron only 30% and you're not likely to get much heme iron from anything else. Oh, sorry. Yeah, iron 26%, magnesium 30%. So you can see with those key things that you mainly get with animal foods, it's not the best source. That's all, compared to some of the other things that we've looked at. But certainly it's okay, and it's got a decent, selection of nutrients. I've heard some theories about how cultures where chicken is the dominant protein source, they tend to grow less tall than cultures where dairy and or beef is the dominant protein source. So, you can feel
What do you
free.
think? I was going to say, why do you think that is? Is it down to the micronutrient needs, do you think?
Partly what
Why?
we're just talking about. I think it's also the ratio of amino acids to some degree. But those are both just theories on my part. I am not 100% sure. I think the most obvious answer is probably what you just said there, Chrissy. I think even zinc is like correlated with height and growth, for instance. So I think, yeah, cultures where there is a lot of beef are overall, and I think they're, what are the tallest? They tend to be Northern European and also African, right? Certain African tribes. And but in both cases, there is that tendency to eat more ruminant meat, as well as to eat dairy. So it's just a correlation. It's certainly not a hard rule or anything, but it's an interesting one to observe. So I think, for let's say growing children, if you want them to be as big as possible, they're adding in, beef and lamb would be a good choice. If you look at eggs, so in this case, I have just picked whole eggs, obviously. We'll see if I'm just biased against eggs. I might be. let's see what 450 grams of eggs would give you a day. So reasonable amount of fat again, but not that much. So 450 grams of eggs, only 56 grams of protein. So first of all, it's not a great protein source compared to, I think, everything else we've
Right.
looked at so far.
Yeah.
So 20% of B1, 130% of B2, 1% of B3, 63% B5, 27% B6, 83% B12. I'm going to skip biotin because most of them don't have anything. Choline, 240%. So definitely high in choline. This is why, other than liver, egg yolk is the highest natural source of choline. Definitely good for that. Folate, 50%. Vitamin A, 45%. Vitamin D, almost 100%. So that's quite unusual as well. That's another reason to have eggs if you want natural vitamin D without sunlight, and you don't have enough sunlight, and you don't want to supplement. Vitamin E, 23%. That's usually because they eat seeds. To be honest, that's usually the main source. Obviously, that's one of the other challenges of eggs as well, is the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, like the opposite of salmon. It's high in omega-6, low in omega-3, same as chicken and same as pork. And then when we come to the all-important nutrients, we have 22% calcium, 3% copper, 150% iodine, 30% iron, 11% magnesium, 16% potassium, 200% selenium, and 30% zinc. And so again, if we think of those nutrients that are very hard to get from non-animal foods, zinc, iron, magnesium, that's probably mainly it, then they just don't have that level, unfortunately. But they got some other decent amount of nutrients, but you can see if you rely on them, first of all, you're not actually getting even that much protein, unless you're having a massive amount of eggs. So you'd have to have twice as much in weight of eggs as beef or chicken or salmon or any other things we talked about to get the same amount of protein. So you have to have like a kilo of eggs a day, basically, to get the same amount.
It's really nice when you spell it out like this and you can look at it, because like sometimes I'll just have like an egg and a few egg whites. I'm like, I'm going to get my protein needs. But when I look at it like that, because as well as you're talking about, having that protein like 3 times a day, I don't do that with eggs, but usually that's how I started off. And I'm like, well, maybe I might want to consider something else that's going to give me a more nutritionally packed first meal.
Yeah, or something with them, right? This is often what I advise people. I don't like eggs, I never have, but I have a lot of clients who do, as you just said, especially in the morning. And I say that's great, but have something with it. If you're more of a red meat person, have some bacon with it, or have some beef sausages, ideally with it, something like that, right? And if you're not, if you're the other type, then have some smoked salmon with it, or something like that, right? That's like, is it eggs Benedict? There's like
Yeah, I think so.
there's like
Eggs
a
Benedict has ham, I think, with the hollandaise sauce.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's like a classic one with like spinach, eggs, and salmon that I'm trying to search for, which is like a classic combination. What I'm saying is, yeah, eggs. I'm not saying to not have the eggs. I'm saying, yeah, I would have something with them, basically, to augment and fortify them.
Absolutely. Okay, yeah, that's great. You've really made me think about that. So thank you.
Awesome. And then let's just pick a couple of vegetarian options. So I'm not going to do nuts and seeds, because nuts and seeds are super high in fat, usually at least 50%, sometimes as high as 80%. And so, and they're often hard for people to digest. So nutrition to digestive capacity, plus a lot of the nutrients are, again, not absorbed well because of anti-nutrients, phytates and oxalates and all kinds of things. But I thought, let's put in a couple of things that people do often think of as protein sources, like you just mentioned with your daughter. Let's do soybeans, which, tofu and stuff is roughly equivalent. And let's do chickpeas, because a lot of people use hummus as like a protein source, or chickpea salad, right? So let's look at chickpeas. Let's look at if you had 450 grams of chickpeas instead, which again seems reasonable. It's like a cup with each meal, something like
Yeah.
that. So, okay. Obviously, there's more carbs in chickpeas or beans in general than any kind of animal protein source. So it's also a carb source that should be accounted for. But still, if we're talking about 450 grams, because it's it's hard to have a lot more chickpeas than that. Like a lot of people that create gas and issues. We're talking like 40 grams of protein. So it's passable, especially with other stuff added, but it's not as much, obviously. So let's look at the micronutrients. So we're talking 45%, 35% of B1, 16% of B2, 11% of B3, 13% B5, 31% of B6, no B12. Obviously, it's one of the challenges of all plant foods. 35% of choline, that's pretty good. 190% of folate. As I said, folate tends to be more from plant foods, which is why I'm not saying don't eat plants, certainly, and for other reasons as well. 10% of vitamin C, no vitamin D, 8% of vitamin E, 22% of vitamin K, that's something. And then calcium, 22%, but it's probably not fully absorbable, unfortunately. 80% of copper, that probably is fully absorbable. There tends to be a lot of copper in plant foods, in fact, maybe too much. 72% of iron, but again, that's going to be the non-heme iron that's not as easily assimilated. 54% of magnesium, that's a good amount of magnesium, to be fair. Over 200% of manganese, could actually be an issue over time, but yeah, occasionally it's certainly not. 37% potassium and 45% zinc. So, I picked chickpeas on purpose. Like, I think chickpeas, black beans, some of the beans are actually pretty nutritious, at least on paper, as protein sources. So, not bad. But you can see it's not as good as anything else we've looked at, I think. Other than, you could say it's actually better than cheese, to be fair. But I did say cheese was the least nutritious of the animal foods. And obviously, in terms of micronutrients, it's more nutritious than cheese. But obviously, in terms of actual protein, it's not very high. Whereas cheese is high, and cheese is full of all the amino acids that you need. And then lastly, we'll look at edamame, which is just basically soybeans. If anyone who didn't know that, by the way. Obviously, I'm not, I say obviously, I think everyone knows I'm not a fan of soy. But I'm not a fan of liver either. Let's just be objective and look at the nutrients. So if we have 450 grams of soy. So soy is unusual that its nutritional profile is more like a nut or a seed rather than a bean, meaning it has moderately to high protein and high fat, like you normally get in nuts and seeds or animal foods, whereas beans are normally moderately high protein and high carb. So soy does have some carbs. It's 40 grams of carbs, but it has 23 grams of fat and 53 grams of protein. And so I want to look at the omega-3. Yeah. Omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is not great, but it's actually still better in this case, you can see, than chicken and eggs, for instance. Sometimes with eggs, if they feed them lots of flaxseeds and stuff, it bumps up the omega-3 a bit, but still it's not a great ratio. So let's look at the micronutrients. So soy is one of the things that is recommended as a meat substitute, as you were just saying earlier, Chrissy. And, it's for a reason. It's reasonably good with nutrition, to be fair, again, on paper. Now, it has all kinds of other things going for it, right, that are maybe not so good. But anyway, just in terms of on paper, we've got 60% B1, 41% of B2, 20% B3, 18% of B5, 22% B6, 0 B12, 46% choline. Most choline supplements are soy-derived, either that or sunflower. 350% folate, so you definitely get a big chunk of folate. 46% vitamin C, 0% vitamin D, 15% vitamin E, 150% vitamin K. Again, a lot of vitamin K supplements are soy-derived. Calcium, 28%. Copper, 77%. Iron, 56%. Obviously not heme iron. Magnesium, 72%. Manganese, 30%. Potassium, 56%. Selenium, 5%. And zinc, 41%. So you can see why, I think it was in the 80s, like soy was pushed as the great animal protein replacement, both for vegetarians, but even just for the general population, right? Because it's considered to have less environmental impact and all the rest of it. And so I'm actually not against soy in the specific case as a food for women who perhaps are getting low in estrogen, so like going through the menopause or post-menopausal, so long as they're also using progesterone to balance out, because it does have that, soy does have that estrogenic effect. But for men, that estrogenic effect is not great. Soy is also reduces thyroid function, which is really not a good thing. It has goitrogens, they're called, in it. And then it does have, various anti-nutrients like phytates, which which block the absorption of a lot of those nutrients. Plus, a lot of the time, most of the time, it's genetically modified, and so a lot of people have allergies to it. And that's one of the other reasons why I often don't recommend not just soy, but also eggs, and also dairy. So the big 6 things that people are most often allergic to, so if I remember off the top of my head, gluten, corn, soy, dairy, eggs, and then just generally nuts. I think that's the primary list. So with all of those, you want to be very careful making them the staple of your diet, because even if you don't have an allergy, if you're not in a state of optimal health, if you have inflammation and stuff like that, over time your body can start to develop an issue with these things. If you make them a staple food, it's just far less likely to happen with beef, with lamb, with chicken, with salmon, with any of these things. Still possible, but it's just way, way less common than it is with them. So that's another reason that these less nutritious protein sources that we're talking about, that's another reason I wouldn't make them staples, is because they're also more likely to be the source of a allergy or intolerance with you over time.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes a really good point there to say that, just be careful about those 6 things if they're highly, highly across your diet every day, constantly. So, no, those are good. This has been really, really excellent, Elwyn. As always, you make me think about things a little bit more like, maybe I want to switch that up. So, no, this has been really, really great. And especially because you've laid it out, and we're able to see the specific amount that you're actually able to take in. In an ideal world, you'd meet all of your nutritional needs in the form of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and more from the foods you eat. However, unless you prepare all of your food at home from scratch using the highest quality ingredients possible, the reality is that most of us need some nutritional support. Most of us need to take supplements if we want to look, feel, and perform at our best on a consistent daily basis. And this is especially true if you have genes that give you an elevated need of certain nutrients. And this is where Feel Younger can help. What I love about Feel Younger is that they offer a huge range of quality supplements and healthcare products formulated and endorsed by Owen Robinson, including must-haves like magnesium glycinate and vitamins B12, D3, and K2. And they do it at affordable prices with free shipping for orders over $50 without ever compromising on quality, purity, or potency. To learn more about how Feel Younger supplements can give your health a boost while supporting this podcast, please visit feelyounger.net and use promo code Rejuvenate to get 20% off your first order. That's promo code Rejuvenate for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net.
All right, so we just added Chrissy's breakfast in here quickly. Maybe not every day, but like a standard breakfast, right, Chrissy?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And so what's your target calories per day, Chrissy?
I'm aiming roughly about 1,700,
Okay.
2,000, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. So I can see the first thing that is possibly a challenge here, but this is more a blood sugar conversation, would be, it's less than 500 calories from breakfast. But let's not worry about that. Let's look at the nutrients of it then. So obviously, this is only like a quarter of your calorie requirement, so we have to bear that in mind when we look at it. But yeah, so very high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, like 10 to 1. And that's kind of a guess because the mayo you actually added here, it doesn't list the omega-6, so that's just based on the eggs. So it's probably actually more like 20 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3.
Which is not good.
It's not great.
Might have to edit that out.
Highly inflammatory. But let's see. But yeah, okay. So in terms of micronutrients, it's certainly got a decent amount of some of these B vitamins. Um, so 40% B1, 74. So that's probably from the flour partly because it's fortified. 75% B2, 20% B3. And remember, only aiming for like, say, 30% from this breakfast because it's a bit of a low calorie one. 27% B5, 9% B6, 25% B12, 26% choline, 34% folate. So it's actually like pretty decent, combination of those B vitamins, Chrissy. Then we got 5% vitamin D. It's kind of tough to get that from food though. 3% of vitamin C. It's because you don't really have fruits and vegetables there, which is fair enough. Vitamin E, 6%. So let's see, 6% calcium, 20% copper, 15% iodine, 16% iron, 10% magnesium, 10% potassium, 94% selenium, and 12% zinc. So good in a lot of ways. I would be thinking, like for the other meals, making up that zinc, making up that iron, making up that magnesium, and making up that calcium. That would be like the top priorities. So because this was such a small meal, actually, Chrissy. So that was your breakfast, not bad. All right, so now we've added Chrissy's dinner in, and we're basically talking about, very, as I said in the break there, bodybuilder-ish meal. She's got cooked rice, cooked chicken thighs, and a little bit of halloumi cheese. So let's see what that does to things. So it's not improving that omega-3 to omega-6 ratio much. We're still at least 10 to 1.
I'm definitely going to get rid of the sriracha mayo.
Good. Or at least replace the mayo with like avocado oil sourced or olive oil sourced. So it's monounsaturated fat instead of omega-6.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned avocado because sometimes like I'll throw in avocado as well and a little marmite on that toast depending. So I'll do that instead.
So let's see. So 98 grams of protein. So even, we've only got 2 out of 3 meals here, but you already got a decent amount of protein. So that's good. You don't have to worry about that. You actually got a decent amount of most of the B vitamins. I won't list them all again, but, maybe an average of 70%. So that's pretty good. Very low vitamin C, very low vitamin E, low D is typical, low K is typical. Still pretty low calcium, despite having some cheese there. Still pretty low iodine, pretty low iron, and you have a genetic need for more iron. So if this was your, actually, a decent amount of zinc now, because you had quite a lot of chicken there, 200 grams of chicken, that still bumped it up nicely. So a meal like this, so let's say those were your staples, then you could almost construct the last meal out of what's missing. So very low potassium here, by the way. Only 20% of potassium. This is the thing, I see this stat floating around sometimes and I wonder if it's accurate, but then when I actually look at people's meal, I'm like, oh yeah, it is like that 99% of people are deficient in potassium. Potassium is, super, super important. We won't go into why. As I said, that's not what this episode's about. But yeah, this is a very important one to check with your clients. It's very commonly assumed that people are getting enough potassium based on nothing. And actually, when you go through it with them, it's very common that they don't. So I often recommend to people, Chrissy, using like low salt, which is a combination of sodium chloride, but then also potassium chloride. So rather than a pill, rather than shaking normal salt on top, you shake low salt on top, which is like, as I said, around half potassium, half sodium, so that you're actually topping up that potassium. And I'd recommend that to you in this case. Also, look up some of the signs of potassium deficiency. You may relate to them. Magnesium, yeah, so this is kind of typical diet where, again, it's going to be hard to reverse that in one meal. So that's where supplementation would be required again. The iron, as we've talked about, there is such a thing as a good iron supplement. I think I've recommended it to you, which is like based on spleen, which is a whole food. But ideally, you would get it from diet, and it's pretty difficult to get up to 100% with a meal, but not impossible. You'd basically want, a very substantial serving of red meat, probably, in that third meal to make that up. Iodine, you saw there's various options for that. Dairy is one option that's significant. Beef is another option that's significant. Obviously, chicken isn't doing it based on that. So some kind of seafood or beef to boost that. And, you know, the calcium is pretty low again. Calcium supplements, again, are not very good. So, like maybe yogurt or something like that. So you're not getting loads of calories, but you're still getting some calcium if you want to get it from food. And yeah, sorry, back to your question about why people who eat more chicken are less tall than people who eat more beef and dairy. I think the calcium in dairy is another significant factor with that. It's not just genetics. I remember one of my best friends in Holland was this kid who'd been adopted from, I think, from a Malaysian country, Malaysian genetics, and he was growing really, really tall there, way more than Malaysians. And the Dutch diet is like so high in dairy, it's insane, and that's what the doctors put it down to. Like there was something about his bones were growing more than he was able to deal with, or something almost like it was causing growing pains, which I think is not super uncommon in teenagers, in children. But yeah, so there's definitely something about calcium that makes you grow taller. Just to answer that question that you had earlier as well. I know you're not worried about growing taller, but just made me think of it. Supplementing with vitamin K again, unless you were to have probably fermented dairy. So again, maybe yogurt, kefir, something like that. So yeah, it's not bad, Chrissy, but I would say you can see where there's some limitations there. And so just as an example, if you were to switch up if you were to add some salmon or something like that to the first meal, so if we do that, like, how do you feel about that? Like 50 grams of smoked salmon with breakfast, for instance?
I love smoked salmon, so yeah, that'd be easy.
All right, so let's try that first. Smoked salmon. Let's do, wild sockeye or something, I guess. None of them say wild, actually, do they? Alaska's usually wild, isn't it? Let's give you that. And then some kind of red meat, or how does red meat feel? Do you not like red meat?
No, I like red meat. I just have to be careful if not to eat too much during the week, just as you were talking about, like my constitution, my digestive capacity, just to load up my system. So,
Or
but I
more
love
seafood. That would be the other option.
Yeah, but I love a good steak, Owen.
Okay, well, let's try adding a steak then and see what happens.
Yeah.
So let's make that third meal a steak, but as you say, maybe don't do that every day, right? Maybe half the time do a salmon or some kind of, sardine or mackerel, some kind of nutritious fish instead. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Or, even maybe varying it with lamb or something like that if, body doesn't want beef every time. So if we're adding 150 grams of beef as that third meal, and then let's see just what adding those two proteins does to things then. We haven't fleshed out the rest of the meal. And how does yogurt or kefir or any kind of fermented cheese
I
or
like
any kind
I like a Greek yogurt. I like that.
And how much of that would you realistically have with one of these meals? Maybe with breakfast, actually, if you can manage it.
Yeah, put in 100 grams. I could do that.
Okay. Greek yogurt doesn't come up with a generic one. I'm just going to do yogurt. Oh, no, it doesn't work either. Oh, maybe it's the way I'm spelling it.
If you put in, the brand I
there
like.
we go.
Yeah, you found one. Great, good.
Just that has the full nutrients, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you said 100 grams, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, see what that does to things. So first of all, obviously that's a lot of protein now because we haven't had it the rest of the meal. So
I was going to say,
yeah. That's okay, we can just ignore that. We've improved that omega-3 to omega-6 ratio straight away, especially if you were to also remove that mayo, as we discussed.
I was going to say, yeah, take it out. Let's see what happens.
Okay. It probably won't change it much because the mayo didn't have much chronometer information, but it will mean that this is now accurate. So yeah, 2-to-1 omega-3 to omega-6, or the other way around ratio, totally fine, excellent. So that's no longer inflammatory, so that's great. It's a decent amount of protein. I mean, it's possibly even you could say slightly too much, but if you want to lose weight and if you're relatively active, it's probably actually a good amount of protein. It'll leave you satiated. It'll stop you overeating. We got to 1,650 calories, and you seem to. So if you did a moderate carb with that steak earlier in the day, a little bit of potato, a little bit of rice, a little bit of beans, whatever you like, then that would bring it right up to about 1,800 like you wanted.
Yeah.
And it would add a bit of potassium as well. So now we're at, over or almost 100% of every B vitamin, over 100% of choline. Still not quite there of folate. Honestly, that would probably become, you said an avocado, right?
Yeah.
Let's see what an avocado does to everything. Let's add one avocado. Okay. Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, probably about 50 grams is what it would be. 45.
Black skin are the more common ones, aren't they?
Yeah, that's what I tend to get, yeah.
So they're 150, like half an avocado? Or
Yeah,
less than that?
Yeah, I tend to eat anywhere from 30 to 45 grams of an avocado when I have it.
Oh, you actually weigh it. Okay, even better.
I do, yeah.
30 to 40. Okay, 40 grams. Okay. Let's have a look. So yeah, definitely this looks like a good weight loss meal plan. First of all, high protein, moderate carbs and fat. So excellent level of all the B vitamins. Not a crazy amount of vitamin A. We personally like that. Let's bump the folate up a little bit. Still not much vitamin C. That's something you might want to consider supplementing because that comes with fruit and stuff like that. I'm getting the impression you're not really having a lot of fruit, which
no, not
enough.
usually. Yeah, sometimes I might have some. Yeah, but it's rare.
Or it's green vegetables, it's broccoli, it's peppers, all of that kind of stuff. But it seems like you're not having a huge amount of those. So a little bit of vitamin C supplement perhaps, or if you wanted to up it without upping the calories much, probably berries would be your best option.
Yeah, I love a good blackberry.
Okay, so maybe like half a pint of berries with your yogurt would not do much to the calories, but it would bump that up a lot. So that would be a natural way of doing it. So now we're at 45% calcium, but actually it's 590 grams. So I think usually 1,000 milligrams is good. So it's getting close. It's actually probably more than most people. So you could potentially be satisfied with that. Copper, I'd be satisfied with that. Iodine, I'd be satisfied with that. Iron, I'd be it's still a little bit low given your genetic needs. And so I think that's because you're having the chicken as the main protein source. So that's kind of the price you pay for that to some degree. Magnesium is still a little bit low. Potassium still a little bit low. Selenium you're getting loads of now. Zinc you're getting a decent amount of. So yeah, I'd say honestly that's pretty good, and it's better than most people, but it is also a good illustration of the point that I was making earlier, which is that when you have steak and eggs as your primary protein source, it's really hard to hit 100% of those minerals specifically.
Yeah.
That really is the issue. Sorry, not steak and eggs. When you have chicken and eggs as your primary protein source, it is hard to hit 100% of all those minerals that you need. But you've hit, over 100% of a lot of them. Now we've made these adjustments. You could always just supplement. And that's what you end up with a client. You could say, if this is what you want to eat because you prefer the taste, fair enough. Or because it's easy to prepare, because it agrees with you, right? Sometimes that's just the way it is. Then supplementation may be a good idea. And I don't remember, Chrissy, were any of this reflected in your nutrition when you tested it? Like magnesium, potassium, iron, were these things that were showing as low when you tested?
No, I mean, my iron, when I do my blood tests, yes, that's always come in low. But as far as the magnesium, I don't think so. The zinc, definitely. That one for sure was. I know. Yeah.
Well, that's good. So it'd be good to make these adjustments that we just talked about then, because it's addressing that significantly. Now, magnesium, you're probably supplementing it, right?
I am. Yes, I am.
So that would be why. Okay, excellent. And the fact that potassium didn't come in low is good then. The main thing that depletes potassium is stress. So it's something to be aware of. But as I said, is it a supplement to put the potassium chloride on? We don't normally, when we salt our food, we don't normally think of it as a supplement, right? So
No.
putting,
But potassium, I was definitely on the lower end
okay,
of
yeah,
that. Yeah. And then the magnesium, I was again, heading towards needing more supplementation with that. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, and honestly, it's pretty typical with a stress pattern anyway. Um, so there you go. So bit of potassium salt with your meal, supplementing magnesium. As I say, I'm not a huge fan of supplementing iron, but the type of supplement recommended to you is basically just a spleen extract, right? So it's kind of actually a whole food. And of course, you could actually just technically eat spleen, though most people are not going to want to do that. Vitamin D, sunlight and or supplementation may be considered. Um, and vitamin K, again, very hard to get that from diet, K2 in general. So I do often recommend supplementing that to people.
Okay. Yeah. No, this has been really helpful because I also tend to get into a pattern with my food. And so what this is helping me identify is, oh, you're getting into a pattern, but look, you're coming up short most days. So these are some tweaks and these are some things that you need to add or change or just, bring in a little extra so that you can really bump up your percentages so that you hit those nutrient needs. Well, again, always eye-opening. So thanks for doing a deep dive into my diet.
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, of course, of course. It's always educational because, I tend to get into a routine, tend to get into a thing. And when you break it down and you can visually see it, and of course, my husband, he looks at me because I have this handful of supplements. It'd be great not to be swallowing all the supplements, but I'm glad I am right now looking at my intake.
And of course, recommended daily allowances, they obviously vary. The healthier you are, the less stress you have, all of that kind of stuff, the less that you need. So obviously they are averages. But unfortunately, a lot of people in this day and age actually need maybe more than the average. And you have to remember the RDA or RDIs are set the levels required to stop you getting sick. That's actually what they're for. They're not for a level of optimal health at all. So this I hope, and we might have to do more episodes of this to fully convince people, but I hope this convinces people that this idea that you can easily get all the nutrients you need from whole foods is not true. It is possible, but the idea that it's easy is not accurate. And I know, I've outlined a specific strategy here. I haven't got Chrissy to 100% of everything, but remember what I've done is I've basically started off with what she's already eating and just added a couple of things. When I work with a client and their primary goal is to get all their nutrients from whole foods, I can and do easily create a meal plan for them that is 100% of everything if they're just willing to eat whatever I ask them to, basically. I mean, with a bit of, do you like this and is this okay, obviously. But, it's not that difficult to create it if you create it from scratch. But even then, it's, 100% of everything. It's not 500% of everything. Do you see what I mean? And so for some things like magnesium or zinc or whatever, there are different things that will increase your need for them. And so, yeah, it's not easy to get it from food. And for people who are watching this going, oh, how did our ancestors get by all this time? Well, for instance, we know that up until, I've lived in a lot of places where the houses are old, and like a lot of the doorways that were naturally there are so low that I have to duck to go through them all the time because people, used to be a lot shorter until relatively recently. People, used to have a lot of other health conditions. These days we have chronic diseases. In the past, they had more infections. But what I'm saying is this idea that we are at the pinnacle of health now in the 21st century is not true. That's been debunked. But this idea that we used to be at the pinnacle of health and we have fallen down a great height is not really true either. It's like we have a bunch of health problems now, but our ancestors had a bunch of different health problems in the past as well. Like as far as we know in recorded history, we've never been optimal. And as far as we know in recorded history, we've never had an optimal level of all these nutrients at all times. And there is a correlation between those things to some degree. It is the basic building block of things. Of course, there's more to it. Of course, there's also stress levels. And of course, there's also sunlight and grounding and fresh air and toxin exposure and emotional connections and on and on and on, all kinds of other things going on. I understand that. But when you're lacking the basic building blocks that required for optimal functioning, or when you're lacking an optimal amount, it has an impact, and it means that you're less able to deal with all that other stuff. You're less able to deal with stress. You're less able to deal with, excessive blue light exposure. You're less able to deal with lack of sleep, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this does matter. It is a foundational issue, and as I said, if you're the kind of practitioner who maybe like a medical doctor, someone who doesn't have the time to go through all this with people, I do strongly encourage you to send the clients to someone who does. It will save you a lot of work in the medium to long term if they start getting their nutrients from food, especially to go full circle to what we talked about at the beginning, because when they feel genuinely satiated from their diet, they're much less likely to overeat, they're much less likely to eat junk foods, they're much less likely to eat empty calories, which means they're much less likely to become overweight. They're much less likely to develop insulin resistance. They're much less likely to develop diabetes and cardiovascular disease and all these other kind of issues. Like, this is really a root issue that, what do they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure or something like that. Like, it's so much better to, address this. And it doesn't matter, even if someone comes to you and they're really quite unhealthy, they can easily get worse. So whatever stage they're at, it's always worth addressing this and optimizing it as much as possible within the limitations of what they're willing to eat, what they can afford to eat, what agrees with them, etc.
Yeah, it's really good. I love it when you do these deep dives and take a look, because I always say, you don't really know what's going on until you look under the hood. And somebody maybe think they're doing absolutely great, but when, you really take a look, you're like, oh, hang on a minute. There's more I could be doing to really take it to the next level. So no, thank you for this.
I had an idea actually for, if you want, put in the comments underneath everything you eat in a day. You have to put what it is clearly stated and the weight. If you want to put that, and if there's several, let's say at least 3 people who do that, I will be happy to do an episode at some point in the future. I mean, who knows how long it would take for 3 people to be willing to share that publicly. But once that happens, I'm happy to do an episode in the future where we go through it and we look at what your nutritional levels are, which I guess you could do for yourself, but then also I'll give some advice like on how I would optimize it. So happy to do a case studies episode if people want to share their own diets as a example.
Beautiful. Well done. So there you guys go. Call to action. Come on. You can do it. Let us see what you're eating in a day. And, you get the option of Elwyn optimizing it for you. And like I said, it was a great experience for me today, because I really thought, hey, I'm doing okay. But when I look at it, it's like there's definitely more I could be doing. So please make sure you guys put that in the comments. Elwyn, before we close, is there anything else? Any final thoughts?
Thanks for watching. I'm doing, live news shows now. I announced that in the last episode. So watch out for that. I don't think we have a set day and time yet. So make sure to go to feelyounger.net and just sign up when the pop-up shows up. Even if you don't want any coupon or whatever, just sign up there anyway, because that's currently how I'm letting people know. I'm just sending an email notification before we go live for that show.
Fantastic. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We know your time is precious and we love sharing it with you. So please make sure you hit the bell icon and the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed that, I recommend watching our latest episode, which you can do by clicking above. And make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment, and share with anyone who you think might appreciate it. Thank you.